embroiled here. So David sent 10 of his men requesting some customary food and drink because David and his men protected them. In fact, in verse 15 and 16, which we will see later, one of the servants testified to that fact, that David and his men kept them all safe when they were in their area. But now we're going to look at 10 and 11, and we're going to see a very rude rebuke, Nabal's rebuke, in verses 10 and 11. "Who is this fellow David?" Nabal sneered to the young men. "Who does this son of Jesse think he is? There are lots of servants these days who run away from their masters. Should I take my bread and water and my meat that I've slaughtered for my shearers and give it to a band of outlaws who come from who knows where?" Okay, well, there's Nabal's response. Nabal rudely and offensively denied David's request. Not only did he violate the ancient laws of hospitality, but also he was speaking derogatorily of David. Mm-hmm. So now here we see David feeling insecure. Nabal's words struck the chords of David's insecurity. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? This, I believe, was a taunt of the enemy that was like a recording being played over and over again in David's head. And now it was actually verbalized. His words, Nabal's words, attacked David's identity and his destiny. So now in 12 and 13, we're going to look at David's reaction. So David's young men returned and told him what Nabal had said. "Get your swords," was David's reply as he strapped on his own. Then 400 men started off with David, and 200 remained behind to guard their equipment. So here we see when David's men went back and reported to David, he basically declared war and dispatched 400 of his men to attack Nabal and his household. Now for a moment, let's just take a step back for a minute. And let's look at 1 Samuel chapter 24 and 1 Samuel chapter 26, the two chapters before and after this incident. This chapter of 25 is sandwiched between two significant encounters that David had with Saul. In 1 Samuel 24, David had the opportunity to take Saul's life in the desert of En-Gedi. Does anybody remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, when he was in the cave. Okay, so David had an opportunity to kill Saul, but he did not. He said, "I will not touch the Lord's anointed." Then in chapter 26, David had another opportunity to take Saul's life in the desert of Ziph. Do you remember that incident? Okay, so here are two situations where David handled himself very well. Before and after. But I had to ask myself, what happened here in this incident? Here is a man who was not chasing after his life. He was just, he was being rude, and he was, he was being arrogant, but he was not seeking to take David's life. So I believe this is what happened. He was in a vulnerable emotional state, and he overreacted. He allowed his insecurities to take over. He got emotionally hijacked. I think that's in your notes. He got emotionally hijacked. He lost his focus, he lost his peace, and he took matters into his own hands. Again, he lost his focus, he lost his peace, and he took matters into his own hands. This is exactly what happens to us. Perhaps there's a major crisis that we are facing, causing us to feel insecure. Or perhaps life's circumstances crowd in and toss us around, one thing piling on top of another. And then we begin to not eat correctly, sleep correctly, and we get hungry, angry, lonely, tired because of all these things happening in our lives. Then, added to that, there are the taunts of the enemy that roll around in our minds, bringing fear and guilt or doubt. And then what happens? Somebody steps on our very last nerve, and boom, our emotions get hijacked, and we react rather than respond out in a place of peace where we're supposed to dwell with our Heavenly Father. That's exactly what Satan wants to do to us. He wants to hijack our emotions. He wants to get us off center, and he wants us to start questioning within ourselves. Who I am, who God is, and what is his purpose for me. Now that we have a glimpse of David's conflict, let's see how this situation is now affecting Abigail's life. So we're going to read verses 14 through 17, and we're going to see the servant's news. Meanwhile, one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail and told her, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, but he screamed insults at them. These men have been very good to us. We never suffered any harm from them. Nothing was stolen from us the whole time they were with us. In fact, day and night, they were like a wall of protection to us and the sheep. You need to know this and figure out what to do, for there's going to be trouble for our master and his whole family. He is so ill-tempered that no one can even talk to him. It's interesting to me to note who the servant ran to. He didn't run to Nabal. He ran to Abigail. Nabal was hot-tempered and wouldn't listen to anyone, but Abigail was level-headed and would know what needed to be done. In verses 18 to 19 now, we're going to look at Abigail's response. Verse 18, Abigail wasted no time. She quickly gathered 200 loaves of bread, 2 wineskins full of wine, 5 sheep that had been slaughtered, nearly a bushel of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 fig cakes. She packed them on donkeys and said to her servants, Go on ahead, I will follow you shortly. But she didn't tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. Now, there were a number of things that Abigail could have done at this point. Some of them could have been, she could have curled up in a heap and cried. That's probably one of the first things I would think about doing. Or she could have recoiled in anger, and she could have lashed out at Nabal. What do you think you're doing? Angrily going back to him. Or she could have fled away in fear with some of her servants and said, I'm out of here. Let him deal with that. But she didn't do any of these things. What she did not do was she did not get emotionally hijacked. Instead, she stayed focused and quickly came up with a plan. This was David's first experience with Nabal. Undoubtedly, it was not the first time that she was in this type of situation. She had been trained by previous experiences with her husband and was familiar with the drill. I'm sure that many times there were neighbors that Nabal had conflict with. And so she had been trained. Part of her plan was to wisely provide the deserved hospitality and food for David and his men. Now we're going to look at verses 20 through 25. As she was riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, she saw David and his men coming toward her. David had just been saying, "A lot of good it did to help this fellow. We protected his flocks in the wilderness, and nothing he owned was lost or stolen. But he's repaid me evil for good. May God strike me and kill me if even one man of his household is still alive tomorrow morning." When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed low before him. She fell at his feet and said, "I accept all the blame in this matter, my lord. Please listen to what I have to say. I know Nabal is a wicked and ill-tempered man. Please don't pay any attention to him. He's a fool, just as his name suggests. But I never even saw the young man you sent." I just love Scripture. I think it is so cool and interesting. It's interesting to me to see the stark contrasts in this portion of Scripture. We see the contrast of David's proud attitude with Abigail's humility. I think perhaps what could have been happening here was that as David was riding on his high horse, you could say, he was overcompensating to mask the insecurity that he was feeling. But you can see the difference between that and her humility. You also see his foolish, rash words. It's so interesting. The Scripture points out what he said right as she was, and how they met. It just so happened that they met at that moment. I just love Scripture. But you see his foolish, rash words, but then you see her words of grace and truth. She didn't she spoke truth about Nabal. Nabal's a fool, you know. And then she goes into what I think is one of the most beautiful messages in the Bible, speeches that anybody made, in verses 26 through 38, Abigail's message. And I'm going to read it first from the Message version. And this is what I believe is the core of Abigail's piece right here in this message. She reveals it through her words to David, because it says in the Bible, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so this is where her piece was coming from. Abigail got to the heart of the matter by speaking to David's heart. And Abigail brought peace to David because her heart was at peace. Now, my master, as God lives and as you live, God has kept you from this avenging murder. And may your enemies, all who seek my master's harm, end up like Nabal. Now take this gift that I, your servant girl, have brought to my master, and give it to the young men, and follow in the steps of my master. Forgive my presumption, but God is at work in my master, developing a rule solid and dependable. My master fights God's battles. As long as you live, no evil will stick to you. If anyone stands in your way, if anyone tries to get you out of the way, know this: your God-honored life is tightly bound in the bundle of God-protected life. But the lives of your enemies will be hurled aside as a stone is thrown from a sling. When God completes all the goodness he has promised my master, and sets you up as prince over Israel, my master will not have this dead weight in his heart, the guilt of an avenging murder. And when God has worked things good for my master, remember me. I believe the key verse here is 1 Samuel 25:29, which I have in your notes. And I want to read it from the NIV version, which is on your notes. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. Now, Abigail was in tune to what was happening. She knew about that he was being chased by David, and she knew about Goliath. That imagery right there, hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. She knew that that's what happened. So she was getting to his heart. She was speaking right to his heart. And the word there, bundle, in the Hebrew is T-S-E-R-O-R, surer. It means something bound up or enclosed in a bag for safety. An object of love and devotion to be clasped and held closely. So that term, bundle of life, was a thing most precious to God when he is preserving carefully and holding close to himself. And what happened in those days, and you know, we even see it today, what they would do is they would take material, and if they had precious jewels, and they wanted to travel and take it somewhere, they would wrap it up in a bundle, and then they would secure it tightly against their body. It's the same thing as a money pouch when we travel overseas, and we want to keep it close to our body. I believe what she had come to understand was that relationship with the Lord. She was that treasure that was bound up closely with her Heavenly Father. And when she was in a crisis situation, she knew the secret of being bound in that bundle with her Heavenly Father. I picture a pearl, a beautiful pearl. You think about a pearl, how a pearl is made. It's a little piece of sand or a parasite that gets into that oyster shell. And then what happens is that liquid is emanated from the oyster to protect it, to keep it, from that irritant, from getting into the oyster. But what is developed from that is a beautiful pearl. And I look at Abigail as a beautiful pearl who was constantly going through this irritation. But what she did was the irritation. She didn't get bitter or sour. She allowed it to work her relationship with her Heavenly Father. And she was that pearl that was bound in the bundle. So when you're going through a crisis and there's all this coming out at you, just picture yourself bound in the bundle with the Lord. Abigail knew what it was like, or knew what it felt like to emotionally have her life sucked out of her. She said here, even though someone is pursuing you to take your life. That's what she said to David. She knew what it was like to feel that within her relationship, but she also knew what it felt like to be precious and valued to her Heavenly Father, protected and held close. So through the life and testimony of Abigail, we see three assurances that steady the heart of one who is bound in the bundle of life with the Lord. The first assurance is in verse 26. God is in control. Again, that's God is in control, and I will read verse 26. Okay, I just have to grab my, I have the scriptures here. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, 26. Now my Lord, oh wait, I'm sorry. Okay, hold on, when did I have 26? Okay, there it is. As God lives and as you live, that's what she said. Abigail lifted his focus onto God. She said, God is alive, as God lives and as you live. She was saying, David, God has not died. Don't dwell on what Nabal did. Don't waste your time reacting to a fool. And then she also said, God has kept you from this avenging murder. He kept you from going down the wrong path. He kept you from taking matters into your own hands. So he's in control, he's still alive, and he keeps you. And then in verses 28 and 29, assurance number 2, God is at work. She said, God is establishing your rule, David. God is establishing your rule. That's like, it wasn't Samuel who was establishing your rule. It was God who was establishing your rule. And she was saying, David, you don't have to defend yourself. God will defend you. And God is protecting you. He will deal with your enemies. You are safe and secure in his care. And then the third assurance in verses 30 and 31, God is fulfilling his promises. Abigail reminded David of God's word that was spoken over him. That's 30 through 31. She said, when the Lord has done all he promised and has made you leader of Israel, don't let this be a blemish on your record. Then your conscience won't have to bear the staggering burden of needless bloodshed and vengeance. And when the Lord, not if the Lord, when the Lord has done these great things for you, please remember your servant. So God was using her to reassure David of God's will for him. She spoke his word. His destiny would come to pass, and everything would work together for good. So when the circumstances in your life are spiraling out of control, rather than to allow your emotions to hijack you, remind yourself that this is the time to draw close to the Lord and allow him to draw you close to himself. One of the words that's often translated peace in the Bible actually says it means, quote unquote, to tie together as a whole when all essential parts are joined together. I think this is even a picture that goes along with this idea of the treasure pouch, of being bound in his bundle and held close to his heart. That peace, it means to tie you together, to keep you whole, to keep you steady. And that, when we are in that place with him, in that bundle, that's when we can hear him whisper to us, be still and know that I am God. I'm in control. I'm working out your situation. I'm at work. I will fulfill all of my promises that I have for you. Both David and Abigail experienced Nabal's uncouth, insulting behavior. David was emotionally hijacked, and his response was violent and explosive and would have caused a lot of collateral damage. Abigail was able to reason with him and help him to regain his common sense so that he would not carry out his vengeance against Nabal. I believe that Abigail had learned how to hold on to an inner peace that held her own heart steady and also enabled her to bring peace to others. In Matthew 5:9 it says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." And for us here today, they will be called daughters of God. Abigail's name means, it's derived from two words in Hebrew meaning father and happiness, which means my father's happiness. And I believe that she brought her father, her heavenly father, happiness when she was acting as a child of God and bringing peace to those around her. Abigail first possessed inward peace, and then her peace came outward after the inward peace. And the same for us. First, the inward peace has to come, and then we will experience outward peace. Abigail advanced. She didn't retreat in the difficult times. She ran into that situation. She didn't run away from it. Abigail was a truth speaker, not a peacekeeper. There's a difference between a peacemaker and a peacekeeper, and she spoke truth. Because she was bound in the bundle of life with the Lord, she was able to step in, she was able to speak truth, and she was able to save lives. And you will see the ending of the story. She knew she couldn't talk to Nabal, but she knew who to go to. She knew that she could speak to David's heart and that he would be reasonable. And he said, David replied to Abigail, "Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you to meet me today. Thank God for your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and from carrying out vengeance with my own hands. For I swear by the Lord, the God of Israel, who has kept me from hurting you, that if you had not hurried out to meet me, not one of Nabal's men would still be alive tomorrow morning." Then David accepted her present and told her, "Return home in peace. I have heard what you said. We will not kill your husband." And then, you know, the story goes on. She told her husband the next day when he was sober what happened. And the Lord struck Nabal, and 10 days later he died. And then Abigail went on to marry King David. She did go on to have a son whose name was Cherioth, and they called him Daniel, which means God is my judge, that she named him. Now, I don't look at this as she lived happily ever after. Because a lot of times we think, oh, she married the king and everything was all roses from here. I don't think that's the way it was for Abigail, because he was on the run, and then there was Bathsheba, there was a whole lot of other things. But I think that she had learned what it was to have peace by being bound in the bundle. And so now when I go through situations, I say, "I'm bound in your bundle, Lord. You know, help me to keep that peace in my heart." So that is the conclusion of what I feel to share with you today. I would love to, if I don't know, Sister